very best friend. And you're mine too, Todd. And we'll always be friends forever, won't we? Yeah, forever.
The Fox and the Hound. Wow, this movie, what can I say? This was one of my favourite childhood movies growing up. I remember owning the VHS all the way back in the early 2000s and always watching it over and over again. There was just something about this flick that made me fall in love with it. Was it the great voice acting, the well written characters, the surprisingly well crafted story that strung many themes together, or perhaps just the natural, wonderful, warming charm that it gave off? Well, I may never know if it was any of those things, but what's important is that I did fall in love with it, and that love has stayed with me well into the present day. As I've grown older and watched through the movie again, including in preparation for this video essay series, I've come to the conclusion that The Fox and the Hound is literally a perfect movie in every way. And I'm not saying this because of the nostalgic rose-tinted glasses glued firmly to my face, because if I was to take them off, this point pretty much still stands. This will be a multi-part series because there's just so much that I want to talk about and cover. So, with that in mind, let me go over how the series will go. I'll be going over the entire movie, scene by scene. This aspect will be structured like this. First I'll give a brief overview of the scene, what happens and what goes on. Then I'll do an in-depth analysis of the scene. This will be where I try to provide a bit of storytelling and go into detail by pointing out key elements and any other interesting things I've picked up on. Finally, I'll end with giving my thoughts on the scene, what I liked, or perhaps didn't like, or even loved. With that in place, the series itself will be split into 4 parts. The first part will cover the opening act of the movie where all of the characters are established and the wheels for the main story are slowly set in motion. The second part will cover the scenes of our 2 leads, whose names you already know, as they form that iconic and classic friendship and become connected deeply. The third part will cover the sections where the plot enters its second act, essentially the parts where things drastically change. And the fourth and last part will be the final act, where everything we've covered up to that point all clashes together. But that won't be all. The fourth part will also be the part where I tie everything back to my main point that I brought forward, hence the title of this entire video essay series. And the very last aspect of this multi-part project will be a surprise epilogue, the one sole thing that drove me to make this entire series in the first place. It's a surprise of course, and it's only for me to know. All that sound good? Alright, let's go! The movie begins with a dramatic and ominous chase. A mother fox is sprinting through the forest with her only fox cub locked in her jaws. The pursuers are a pack of dogs, as evidenced by the barks. These dogs presumably belong to a hunter. The mother fox dashes all over the forest, doing everything she can to escape and protect her loved one. She runs through long stretches, speeds up embankments, and jumps off rocks. Eventually, she makes her way out of the forest towards an open field. In this field sits a wooden fence, a farmhouse and barn, and a large tree. In this large tree is an owl, who is lured out by the commotion of the chase. The owl is there to watch the mother fox place her cub down next to the fence and hide him in the grass, keeping him safe from harm. After this, the mother makes a break for it. She disappears over a hill, and there's the sound of a gunshot, 2 in fact, the second one scaring off a flock of birds. Just before the main opening scene occurs, the title sequence is in use first, though this does essentially carry on through this opening. It begins with grey clouds and a faint whistling wind before a long trip through the forest itself occurs. All of the trees are shrouded in the grey fog and mist and are almost shadows. There's no music here throughout almost all of this section. Instead, all that's heard is the ambience of the forest, such as the aforementioned wind and the quiet sounds of birds tweeting in their nests. While the forest itself is peaceful, these ominous attributes give off the feeling of worry and discomfort. The grey clouds and mist also showcase dampness in the forest, as of course mist is essentially condensation, but there's also more attributes that make this wet feel more clear and obvious. The trip through the forest slowly begins to turn dark. As it progresses, more sounds are heard. There's a deep booming sound quietly beating in the background, while the dog bark is then introduced far off in the distance, and this alone shows the scale and depth of the forest. Both these sounds continue to steadily get louder, working in tandem with the visuals getting darker, as towards the end of the main title sequence, the trees begin to disappear and a black void has taken over. Then there's a very ominous but interesting fading shot of a spider's web strung between the leaves of some of the trees. There's some glittering specks clinging to the threads of the web that also work in tandem with the music track, as they glitter both weaker and stronger as the camera shifts its focus and the music has a twinkle effect. Following this, some rather clever camera motions make the web disappear and bring the forest back into view. It's still shrouded in darkness, but the grey sky has disappeared, and it's now in colour in the form of orange. Around here is when the music finally kicks in and slowly cranks up. Then, the mother fox appears suddenly with her cub right as the music enters its main melody. What's interesting here is how both the mother and her cub are hidden amidst the shadows, thus hindering a clear view of them. This simple but effective visual adds to the whole unease of the scene, as the feeling of worry is made the main priority. The mother has a lot of sharp movements, as many times throughout this opening, she flicks her head back to see how close or far the dogs are. And notice how I said dogs. That's because at this point, there are many dogs in pursuit as multiple barks are heard. There are a lot of very minor details sprinkled throughout the pursuit too, one being the same glittering specks being flicked off of a blade of grass as the mother rushes past it, thus confirming the idea of not only a mist blanket through the forest, but also a recent rainfall, perhaps one that had just finished right before the title sequence, and the grey clouds are the aftermath. The other is some small pebbles that get pushed off by the mother's body movements as she reaches the high rock. Also a clever use of camera movement when the mother runs along the stream, with her reflection being what's seen first. While on the subject of the stream, the orange sky is also reflected too, showing the time of day that this scene is occurring at. Back to the scene of the mother on the high rock, the background is a vast sprawling landscape of cliffs and trees. Some of the trees almost looking like they're mounting the side of the cliffs, and a wooden bridge is also running along through the canyon formation, and do remember this bridge for the future, it's going to be significant. This background once again highlights how large the forest really is, finally giving us the visual representation of this fact after it was shown to us audibly earlier on with the echoing dog bark. The music is really the main highlight here. It's a strong symphony of stringed instruments. When the forest is finally left behind, the open field is a warm welcome visually, but not in the feels, as the circumstances of getting into this field have sad undertones. The mother's feelings of leaving her cub behind are expressed clearly when she reaches the fence and places him down. She looks around many times to see if the dogs are nearby, and when realising that she has space, she uses the chance to put her cub into safety, and she rubs her head against him and holds it close. Because this is going to be the final time she ever sees her only child, her love, her whole world, but the most important thing is that he's safe from harm. It's at that point when the dogs finally get close and the mother runs away, having successfully saved her child, but at the cost of her own life, and the gunshots that are heard after she disappears over the hill tell the whole story, which is a very sad thought. The owl's reaction is even an accurate response to what the viewers were feeling too. I think this scene does a fantastic job of visual storytelling, something that I really like. There doesn't need to be dialogue explaining what's happening. Audio cues and body language is something that we can easily recognise and process feelings from. I love the look of the forest in the grey mist and dark shadows. Even if it has negative undertones, it still maintains its wonderful natural beauty. I also appreciate just being able to hear the ambience of the atmosphere, which really takes you in. The speckling water droplets on the spider's web and grass strand are such small details that many have not appreciated or picked up on, but I really like them. The music is also a perfect choice for telling the story, as like I said with the audio cues and body movements, music itself can also be a fantastic storytelling tool. I like that the mother and her cub were in the shadows at the start, and while they did come into view through colours, we still couldn't really make them out clearly, once again adding to that mystery and uncertainty. That wonderful background of the cliff and trees is also mesmerising, and it really shows the large scale of the forest, and the background of the farmhouse and barn in the field too. It looks just like a painting that could easily be framed and hung up on the wall. Finally, the best attribute of this scene is how the dogs, and presumably Hunter, were never seen on screen, not even a single time. This really was a way of making the audience use their imaginations to put the pieces together and form the story. Overall, this was a powerful opening, evoking unease and sadness, and we're only at the start here. There's plenty more to go through, so let's do that and head into the first scene where the plot gets going. The owl is saddened by the sounds of the gunshots, as she also realises what's happened. She heads down to where the fox cub was hidden by his mother and tries to comfort him, but the fox cub is still frightened and keeps hiding away from her. Wanting to help him out, the owl, who's introduced herself as Big Mama, says that someone will have to look after him. Needing some help with carrying this out, Big Mama flies up to a tree to meet her friends, a finch named Dinky and a woodpecker named Boomer, to see if they can hatch up a plan together to help the fox cub in this time of need. Dinky eventually gets an idea, which is to lure out the occupier of the nearby farmhouse, Widow Tweed, towards the fox cub, so she'll be overcome with emotion and have no choice but to take him in. Boomer pecks at her door to get her attention, and Big Mama and Dinky take a piece of her laundry and drop it down on the fox cub. Needless to say, Tweed is touched by the innocence and cuteness of the fox cub and warmly takes him under her wing. She says that the fox cub is such a little toddler, and that gives her the idea to give him a name, and that name? Todd. Both now have each other, ensuring that neither of them will be lonely again. There's a strong emphasis on body movements and facial expressions in this scene. During the first interaction between Big Mama and Todd, Todd's unease of encountering someone he's unfamiliar with is highlighted clearly simply through his sharp movements and visible fear on his face. He constantly hides behind the fence post and peers out with tremble, shown through an open mouth and raised eyebrows. Big Mama's sympathy is highlighted as well through her facial expressions and speaking. She's doing her best to help Todd in the time of need, but understands that he's just too frightened to really get close to and comfort, hence why she realises that someone really does need to take care of him. Todd does begin to show some affection towards Big Mama after a little bit though, as he snuggles his head against her soft, warm fur, finding a lot of comfort from it, with his closed eyes and straight closed mouth displaying how deep into it he is. Though Big Mama is quick to lightly brush him off, albeit not in a harsh way, Todd also scrambles back suddenly at this realisation, but he's still finding happiness from her. Before Big Mama goes to meet with Dinky and Boomer, there's a knocking sound that's heard.
No.
It echoes through the farm, and Big Mama looks up and away towards where the sound is coming from, which highlights that Dinky and Boomer are quite high up and far away. On the subject of those two, they're getting involved in some antics with trying to catch a caterpillar, whose name is Squeaks according to the opening credits. Both are unsuccessful at that present time due to Big Mama needing their help, and Squeaks' relief to this is rather exaggerated, as when he breathes a big sigh, his eyes almost pop out of his head. When the bird trio heads back to where Todd is, there's a nice detail in the form of light taps as they land on the fence, all in different pictures due to the trio's varying sizes. Dinky and Boomer's good hearts are highlighted too, as both show sympathy for Todd just like Big Mama. Dinky's is highlighted visually through a head shake, while Boomer's is more literal as he expresses sorrow through speech.
Oh, poor little guy.
Todd has his feelings once again highlighted through simple visual body movements, as at separate times he looks up to the bird tree on top of the fence while still hidden in the grass, the first time through loneliness and sadness from his frown and raised eyebrows, and the second time through curiosity with his head slightly cocking upwards. The strongest body movements are from Dinky. When he's thinking of ideas of how to help Todd, he hobbles along the fence post, which he's small enough to fit on, flicks his head rapidly and rustles his tail feathers. The movements are an accurate replication of how a bird of his size and stature would move around. The farmhouse of Tweed is also shown in detail. It has a warming, cosy look that's full of life, with its bright primary colours of yellow and green, and sprinkles of both red and pink implemented too. A red car is also parked outside of Tweed's house. It's reminiscent of a Model T Ford, or perhaps even a Stanley steamer, which is started with the use of a hand crank and has a large steering wheel. From just this obvious look of Tweed's car, the time period of the movie is clearly shown. It takes place in either the 1900s, the 1910s, or perhaps a bit before. The 1920s and onwards are out of the occasion due to one other aspect that is shown a bit further down the line. While talking of Tweed's residence and form of transportation, Tweed herself should also be highlighted. From her name alone, which is only shown in full during the credits, and quoted differently through the rest of the movie, Tweed is without her loved one. That's very sad. So in many ways, the plan that Big Mama, Dinky and Boomer come up with not only helped Todd, but helped Tweed too. At the heart of it all, Tweed and Todd both needed someone by their side once more. As I mentioned about Tweed's farmhouse being cosy, this greatly translates to her personality too. Her soft-spoken, grandmotherly nature is just the right type of care Todd needs, and Tweed is pure of heart. The fact that she had to bless her soul at the sight of Todd speaks volumes of her personality. During Todd and Tweed's first encounter, the themes of sadness and fear are conveyed again in different forms. The sadness comes from Tweed wondering where Todd's mother is. Which, well, we know. And the fear comes from Todd as someone he's unfamiliar with approaches him again. He frantically swipes in frightened defence as he worries that harm is coming to him again, but Tweed has been shown clearly as a nice person that means no harm, so the trust of her to take care of Todd has been well established. Another aspect that's established is the innocence and purity of Todd. When Tweed has taken him in, she feeds him milk from a baby bottle, which is something Todd enjoys greatly, as even when Tweed pulls the bottle away, Todd lunges straight for it again. It's really a blessing the two wound up together, and without Big Mama, Dinky and Boomer all conversing together to do a good deed, they never would have brought such happiness to two kind souls. This is a great introduction scene. It establishes our protagonist and four of our supporting characters, and they're all so likeable. Todd being the innocent fox cub who's just lost his only love, you just can't help but feel sorry for him and you just want him to be okay. I love the part where Todd is interacting with Big Mama. He's so scared of her that he's hiding away. It's such a relatable moment because I'm sure everyone has been in that situation where they were very young and ended up being separated from a loved one and then seeing a face that they're unfamiliar with. As a small child, that feeling is honestly very scary. I know I've been in that scenario before myself and understand the fear that comes with it. Speaking of Big Mama, she was the best choice of character to first interact with Todd. She's so warming and comforting, her soft look and voice really amplifies this aspect. Pearl Bailey did a really fantastic job bringing forward that caring attitude. Dinky and Boomer are pretty solid as well. I won't go too much into their characters here as they do have another couple of scenes later where they get fleshed out, but while on the topic of them, I really like Dinky's body movements, which I don't think many people appreciate. They're just so accurate to a real small bird. The animators captured that so well. Finally, Widow Tweed was just the perfect type of character to take care of Todd. Everything about her is just real and raw. She really is just a good person at heart, especially since she has to bless her soul when she first saw Todd. During that part, Todd's swiping and flailing is just so cute, really conveying and emphasising the fear he has encountering unknowns, and obviously feeling scared to the point where he thinks he's in harm and is just fighting so hard to defend himself. Then once Tweed and Todd have warmed up together, I just smile and laugh with joy every time when Todd lunges forward and tries to grab the milk bottle when it was pulled away from him for just a fraction of a second. He clearly loved it so much that he didn't want to stop drinking it. The atmosphere is also so beautiful, with the fields of grass and the tall trees, as well as Tweed's farmhouse. It's so cosy looking, and as someone that really likes classic cars, I love Tweed's car too. It's one of those rickety old bangers that I just really like the look of. The music here also works well in the scene, with the soft melody that's played when Big Mama and Tweed are both comforting Todd, and the dramatic melody that plays when Big Mama and Dinky are taking Tweed's laundry. Every music track just fits perfectly with the situation. So overall, this was a strong first scene to establish our lead character and the side ones, getting us familiar with who they are, and starting our connection with them that we're going to form. And with that, on to the next part. Just across from Tweed's, another rickety banger drives along a dirt path up to an old shack and parks up. The driver is a hunter named Amos Slade, and by his side is Chief, an old grey dog. Amos has just arrived home while Chief was sleeping, and he says he has a surprise for him inside a small bag. This surprise turns out to be a small hound puppy. Amos hopes to turn him into a hunting dog, or hunting dog as he puts it, even if he's only small now. Chief isn't too pleased with his surprise, but Amos says that Chief will have to look after him. Chief shows some spiteful coldness towards the hound pup, but when he snuggles up with Chief, this seems to touch his heart, and he happily sleeps alongside him. So this sees our second main character and the rest of the side ones be introduced, but this introduction is noticeably shorter than the previous one revolving around Todd. This is due to the fact that Todd is a wild animal, therefore a few loopholes needed to be implemented in order to slot him into the story and advance the plot, thus it goes longer. But the hound pup, whose name you already know but we'll get to that later, is a domestic animal, so his insertion into the story is a lot more straightforward in comparison, thus it goes shorter. Amos is introduced as being quite similar to Tweed in the fact that he's an elder and also lives alone. His residence is a rundown old shack that's built completely in grey, befitting of his gruff nature as a hunter, much like how the farmhouse of Tweed captured her warming nature. There's even an interesting lockup of sorts just outside his house across the dirt path road, which will be explored into later on. However, a different quality that Amos has that Tweed doesn't is that he still has someone by his side, this being his dog Chief. The two obviously have a strong bond, which is shown very clearly right as they meet up for the first time, but the key being for the first time in the flick. This is clearly a long-term bond judging from how old Chief is and how comfortable the two are during their playful interaction. Chief is able to be excited without going too over the top, and Amos has enough experience and time spent with him to quickly calm him down. It's never established if Amos used to have a loved one of his own by his side, but this doesn't seem to be the case. He seems happy enough just having his dog, or rather dogs now, since the hound pup has joined the family. Chief being unhappy with the hound pup makes sense since he feels like his inclusion would drive a bit of a wedge between his relationship with Amos. Perhaps the idea that Amos would start caring for the hound pup more than him, a common trope that's been used many times. The hound pup possesses the same innocent likability as Todd, his wrinkles always fall over his eyes, and he gives a constant smile, even when subjected to rude behaviour like when Chief rolls him out of his barrel, which he cheekily stole from him. Though this wasn't the only cheeky antic that annoyed Chief, as the hound pup licked his nose just before this. The hound pup even does the same movements as Todd when Amos picks him up, flailing his legs around, though in his case it's from excitement, whereas with Todd it was from fear. Despite Chief's rejection of the hound pup, Amos proves himself to be a fair and firm man, as he politely states that Chief will have to get used to the hound pup, meaning he's here to stay, and Chief's protests against this won't change that fact. But Chief is quickly made likeable too, and is shown to have a soft spot. The initial coldness he shows towards the hound pup isn't too mean-spirited, and he's easily touched by his innocence. Alright, this scene delivered quite a lot in its shorter runtime. I like that Amos, Chief and the hound pup were established quickly. It was straight to the point, which I appreciate. The love Amos and Chief have for each other is made obvious so quickly and simple. We can easily make this out just from that very short first interaction. I really like that. Amos has a clear love for those he cares about, just like Tweed, and I respect that he's happy just being on his own with his dogs. Chief was still likeable even during his initial meeting with the Hound pup, but the way he warmed up to him helped us take to Chief more while fleshing him out, showing that he has a heart deep down. The Hound pup is very cute, just like Todd. His droopy eyes are so adorable, and he's just so innocent that he doesn't acknowledge that Chief is being spiteful towards him. So this is a solid scene all around, and the three have been established just like that in much simpler circumstances in comparison to our previous group of characters. So we're ready to form that connection with them, for better or for worse, as we'll soon see. A few weeks after Tweed took Todd under her wing, Tweed is milking her cow, Abigail, in the barn while Todd struts in. He's rather bored as he plays around with Abigail's tail and peers over at a hen and her chicks. Tweed knows that Todd means no harm, lightly telling him off for the first moment. However, the second moment ends up causing chaos and disarray, eventually leading to all of the milk being spilled. Tweed isn't happy with Todd for this, so she tells him off a bit firmer, but her anger isn't to last as Todd is too pure and innocent to stay cross at. Tweed kindly sends Todd on his way to go out and play since he's too bouncy to stay in the barn. Eventually, Todd spots Dinky and Boomer flying overhead, and he follows them, hoping they might want to play with him. A time jump is made clear in this scene, judging from the fact that Todd is no longer the tiny, timid fox we first saw him as. No, not at all. He's now a bit bigger, more outgoing, playful, and somewhat mischievous. With Todd now being older and more confident, he has a chance to be fleshed out and shine even brighter. The somewhat cheeky attitude is a perfect characteristic for Todd, as evidenced by him frolicking around with Abigail's tail. His innocent curiosity that is fueled by his boredom is highlighted when he looks over at the hen and chicks. The purity of Todd, another quality he possesses, is also showcased by his little tiny gibs that he makes when he begs Tweed for some milk coming out of Abigail, which ties back to the previous scene where he was drinking the milk bottle. It's made clear that Todd is one for milk, and he gets so much joy from it. The reaction of the hen to seeing Todd reaching for her chicks is an accurate and understandable one, as due to Todd's natural place in the world as a fox, it would obviously be assumed that he would want to cause harm to them. But this idea has been challenged by this point, and proven to not be the case, as Todd's purity, innocence, and heart of gold has already been well established. It's ultimately Todd's curiosity that inevitably leads to the trouble. It won't be the first time that this occurs either. But of course he didn't mean to cause that at all. Tweed knows this too deep down, but still takes the mature decision to tell Todd off for his behaviour, but does not go too hard on him, as his natural charisma is just something she can't stay angry at. A mother and child relationship is established between Tweed and Todd, and this allows their bond to be strengthened and formed deeper, as during the part when Tweed tells Todd off, Todd retreats into the corner in the same way that a child would after their misbehaviour is about to be scolded at by their parents. This comes from the child mentality that hiding away will make their parents not see them and they can avoid being told off. Even Tweed telling Todd to come here is an accurate response to what a parent says to their child. Keeping with accuracy, Todd looks at Tweed with an oopsie look on his face even after he has been shown the spilled milk, conveying the message of whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Tweed's warming nature is also made clear again when she says that Todd is part of the family, showing how kind she is that she's welcomed him so quickly, as well as her firm and experienced attitude stemming from the love and bond she has for her other animals on the farm, as she is able to quickly and sternly calm Abigail down after the disarray has occurred. The boring life on the farm is something that's expressed through Todd's facial expressions after he scampers out of the barn, rolling his eyes and looking upwards, making it clear that Todd just wants to have some fun. But he might be able to, as his face immediately lights back up when he sees Dinky and Boomer due to the possibility of now being able to have a good time with some friends. Well, I'll be honest here, I love this scene a lot. Tweed and Todd's relationship is made even stronger, and Todd's natural cheekiness is just something you can't hate. He's really precious here. His little tiny gibs that he makes when he's begging for a drink of milk just oozes so much cuteness, and I just can't help but smile. His starring moment here has to be his reaction to being told off, hiding away in the corner, hoping he can avoid it, and his facial expression as he slowly turns around after being shown the spilled milk, just so innocent. Tweed's warmness is also so touching. Her saying Todd is part of the family shows how much she loves him, and it's so thoughtful of her to welcome him so fast. He's clearly bringing so much brightness to her life, after she hasn't had it for so long. Tweed really needed and deserved this, and Todd did too after what he went through. I like that Todd is written as a pure child with Tweed being his mother. The interactions between them feel so natural and real, especially when Tweed tells Todd to
come here.
That is literally exactly what parents say when talking to their child about their misbehaviour. Great voice acting by Jeanette Nolan for Tweed as well. It sounds so genuine, right from her laughs, gasps of shock, calming Abigail down, and telling Todd off. Just so raw and a really well done effort from her. Todd also finally talks at the end of the scene, but I'll talk about his voice later when he has more lines. For now though, let's join Todd on the journey of following Dinky and Boomer. It's now their turn for the spotlight. Dinky and Boomer fly over to a tree, looking to pick up where they left off at the start with trying to catch Squeaks. The two eventually spot him inside the main trunk of the tree, and after Dinky points him out, Boomer looks to nail him, but isn't successful after getting his head stuck and narrowly missing Squeaks several times. Todd shows up amidst the antics, but Dinky brushes him off in the heat of the moment. A wild goose chase occurs, eventually leading to Squeaks ending up at a dead end and hiding in a hole. He ends up getting spotted by Dinky, which leads to Boomer pecking through the branch to try and get him, but he fails and instead breaks it off before finally falling to the ground. The two blame each other for their failed attempt to get what they claim is breakfast, and this ultimately doesn't seem too fun for Todd, so he leaves the pair, eventually following a butterfly around. Dinky and Boomer get more screen time, thus enabling them to be fleshed out more. The accurate body movements of Dinky are again demonstrated as he hobbles and glides along the branches of the tree and flicking his head around after popping out of a small stump. Dinky is also shown to be determined in his goal in trying to catch Squeaks, confidently stating that he won't get away this time, and being so focused and deep into finding him that he firmly presses himself against the tree bark to try and listen for him and bounces on one of his thin legs, showing his strong desire to achieve the goal. Boomer is shown to be clumsy and careless throughout, as well as being too eager when he eventually follows through. In the former case, he is not keeping his voice down, which will obviously alert Squeaks to their presence, and he rests lazily against the tree when told to listen by Dinky, which demonstrates he's not listening properly, and this ultimately leads to poor Dinky being crushed. The latter case is proven too when Boomer relentlessly hammers and drills into the tree bark both times when he's informed by Dinky where Squeaks is. He nearly hits Dinky twice during these separate attempts, which shows that his eagerness stops his consideration. Though despite being presented as not too sharp, Boomer is still intelligent. We know this from his previous scene when he helped Todd. It's less a lack of intelligence and more a case of being too excited and slightly naive, with him not thinking before he takes action, which will lead to disastrous results, such as his head getting stuck in the tree trunk and him hurting himself when he breaks off the branch and falls to the ground. This slight diversion from the main story into what is now the subplot adds a sprinkle of humour into a flick that has started off deep and heavy, thus balancing out the feels and adding more emotion to the viewers. I think Dinky and Boomer are a welcome addition to this story, despite a common complaint that their inclusion is unneeded and the subplot of them chasing Squeaks is unnecessary. With Big Mama being the mentor to Todd, Dinky and Boomer are there to fill a similar role as additional support. While the two do their best to help Todd, they don't really have the knowledge and wise words of Big Mama to really serve as the main guardians of Todd, so to speak. They're a nice pair to be extra friends for both Big Mama and Todd. This scene also establishes them as the clear comedy duo of the flick. Sometimes these can be a bit hit or miss, but I think they're executed well. There's some more great voice acting here, first from Richard Backerline, who gives Dinky that mafia gangster style voice that's a bit sleazy and cocky. It works well for him based on his status as the brains of the duo. Him telling Todd to stay out of it while Boomer is trying to nail Squeaks is understandable, as when one is frustrated with something not going to plan, they tend to lash out in the heat of the moment, so it's not too bad. Paul Winchell voices Boomer and gives him that certain goofiness relating to his status as the brawn of the duo, but not the typical dumb muscle type. If the name Paul Winchell sounds familiar, that's because he did some voice acting for Disney before. He was the original voice actor for Tigger in Winnie the Pooh, and I think he was the best voice of Tigger. He's clearly putting on the same voice for Boomer, which might be a distraction to some, but I like it personally.
Sure I did. Everyone's scared of Tiggers. Who are you?
Oh, sure, Dinky. This is the place. I never forget a tree. I never forget a tree.
So this was a fun comedic scene, and I don't think it takes away from the main story and breaks it up. It's just a nice breather that gives a laugh and doesn't last too long that it feels like filler. It helps to flesh the bird duo out. We'll see Dinky and Boomer again soon, as this won't be the last time they get up to these antics. But for now, let's keep going. While Todd hops around chasing the butterfly, Chief and his hound pup friend are drinking water over at Amos's house nearby. The hound pup's name? Copper. Copper suddenly catches a scent in the air that gets his attention. Chief sniffs the scent himself and says it's Amos cooking, but Copper disagrees, and being so curious about this scent, he decides to go and find out what it is, much to the surprise and annoyance of Chief. Once again, as a result of the time jump established during the barn scene, Copper has also grown a bit bigger since he was last seen, but he's still small because he has to really peer inside the dog bowl just to get a drink of water. The scent has Copper so interested that his nose twitches around many times and he steps all over the place while he tries to figure it out, as getting closer and closer to the scent makes it stronger, hence why Copper wants to head out to find what it is. Much like Todd, Copper is shown to be curious too, but his actions as a result of this feeling are not as outgoing. The curiosity is visible on Copper's face as he always narrows and squints his eyebrows in confusion and thought. Chief is now established as a mentor to Copper in the same way Big Mama was to Todd, now that he's warmed up to him following his cold introduction. Chief coming to the conclusion that the scent is Amos cooking grits, a type of porridge, and fatback, the layer of fat from the backskin of a pig, is a result of him not having a stronger sense of smell, as he has less olfactory sensors, so he's not able to pick up smells that are far away like Copper can. But Chief's sense of smell comes into effect later on, which is why this aspect of his weaker sense should be considered. Chief shows amusement, surprise and annoyance in quick succession in a row. He's amused by Copper's curious attitude, surprised when he sees him leaving, and annoyed when Copper doesn't listen to him about Amos not going to be happy about him wandering off, though Chief only refers to Amos as the Master, implying that he is loyal and respectful to him. A pretty short scene, but one that really fleshes out Chief and Copper even more. Pat Buttram does a great job having up the thick southern draw for Chief, while Copper really shines here. I really love his voice so much. Corey Feldman just has that certain pitch, tone and delivery to make you feel the cuteness Copper has. His voice even cracks when he says, "That's not what I smell," just to add to that sweetness even more.
That's not what I smell.
Copper's mannerisms are also so full of life. He looks so adorable having to really peer inside the dog bowl to take a drink of water because he's just so small, and the way his ears flop around when he shakes his head is just too cute to not smile at. I appreciate the nice detail of Chief not being able to pick up the scent Copper is sniffing, really highlighting the difference between their senses of smell. So our two leads are getting closer together, which finally leads into my favourite scene of the whole movie.